a show to do.
Black Betty, bam lamb, whoa, Black Betty, bam lamb, Black Betty had a child, bam lamb, the damn thing gone wild, bam lamb said a word.
You could be here a while. It's pretty backed up.
Well, late is not an option. I'll need to find another way, but thanks for getting me this far. I think I got my 10,000 steps.
Oh, Leah, thank goodness you're finally here. You're on any minute.
You would not believe what I had to do to get here. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Trend Micro Perspectives 2022. I need to change into something more comfortable. I'll see you on the set.
Get how to better manage your enterprise attack surface. To gain insights from industry analysts and find out how complete visibility can help you maintain a solid threat defense. To hear digital transformation and security insights from leading global organizations. To learn about our strategy for helping you better manage cyber risk across your dynamic attack surface. Get ready for the power of one. Welcome to Trend Micro Perspectives 2022.
That event I've dressed in, I guess I don't. Oops. Thank you for joining us at Trend Micro Perspectives. We have a great show for you lined up today. This event is designed to bring you expertise and perspectives from around the world, from various experts. And we have an action-packed lineup for you today. We are going to be discussing how to balance cyber risk while accelerating your digital transformation, and talk about the need and the challenges with understanding, communicating, and mitigating that risk. We are very honored to welcome executives, product and threat experts from Trend Micro, and of course, experts from across the industry. We have people here from Sandstone, BitDiscovery, Arjo, Targa, Forrester, and Wayfair. I'm very excited to welcome a special guest, Ali Mellon, Forrester analyst, who will be talking about her perspectives on the technology and best practices you need to consider as you manage risk. And I'm very excited to welcome Trend Micro's very own CEO, Eva Chen, who will share her vision for a unified cybersecurity platform, Trend Micro One. We're also going to take a deeper dive look under the covers at that innovation with some demos. Now, if you're new to the platform, just a reminder that you can resize your window, customize your own viewing experience. If you have any questions, don't hesitate. We have experts standing by. And to get the most out of this event, join the conversation, chat with your peers, chat with your favorite trenders. You'll also see a handouts tab, and in there we've put some valuable resources for you so you can continue your research. Now, if English isn't your first language, no problem. You can watch real-time translation in 18 different languages. I think for those of you who want to watch this again or share it with colleagues, please know that we are recording and we'll share this as well as the presentation materials with you after the event. I think for anyone that loves data, you'll appreciate this. The artwork that we're using for the event is actually a piece created by world-renowned data artist Brendan Dawes. It actually represents billions of pieces of data analyzed in Trend Micro's cybersecurity platform across multiple layers, really helping with that detection and response. Even in a world where cyber attacks can be ugly and chaotic, we believe that cybersecurity can be beautiful. And that brings us to why we're here today. In a recent survey we did for the Cyber Risk Index, we found that 3/4 of global organizations believe that they will be successfully attacked in the next 12 months. In a related research study around risk, we did find that almost all IT decision makers believe that the leadership team does not fully understand risk. And why is that? Many people believe that they just don't have the tools or the necessary ability to measure that risk exposure. It's just not sophisticated enough. And many of them admit to struggling with quantifying or demonstrating their organization's risk exposure to the leadership team. Risk is a big topic, we know that, but it is a really important one. And to help us understand a little bit more about what kind of risk we're talking about, I'd like to welcome David Chow, a new trender whose job is now Chief Technology Strategy Officer. Most recently, David was a CIO with the US federal government. Please join me in conversation with David Chow. Good morning, David. Welcome to the studio.
Great to be here.
You know, David, I looked at your bio and it is so long and impressive. I didn't think I could do it justice by reading it. Could you just tell us a little bit about your story?
Sure, of course. So I spent 20 years in the federal government, started and worked to become the deputy CIO, the CISO, and the CIO. For the past 15 years, those are the roles that I was in. And I worked in financial regulator for mortgage and banking, as well as transportation, critical infrastructure. And very lastly, I worked for Department of Housing and Urban Development as a CIO. So after I exited last year, I actually went on to work for a financial technology company, which is publicly traded. I was a global SVP. So I do have experience from both the public sector side as well as the private sector side.
Right. Well, and it just tweaked my interest when you said, you know, as a CIO of the White House and some of these big US federal agencies, what did you think about what I said in terms of, you know, IT decision makers thinking that leadership doesn't understand cyber risk?
That's actually near and dear to my heart, especially my experience working at the White House. I was there from 2007 to 2009, and I was the deputy chairperson for presidential transition from Bush to Obama, the director for environment. Really high demand. It's a work environment that's high stress. There's a demand to excel, especially supporting the president of the U.S. And there's a lot of focus to make sure that the presidential policy is getting pushed. So so when people are making errors or when there is the necessary downtime that's needed, basically a lot of time that it gets bypassed. There's process bypass, certain risk that's not been overlooked. The organization needs to support the president. So through the you can sense that there is a level of disconnect on cybersecurity and cyber risk, especially the focus on that. So in 2014, long after I left, there was a breach. A breach occurred at the. This is actually publicly information. You can Google that information. But the bottom line is that it served as a wake-up call to the White House. So what happened was that they actually ousted the CIO, the deputy CIO. They started focusing more on making sure that there's necessary monetary investment as well as resource investment, as well as the overall process into the White House technology area. but then also focusing and shift that overall team into the control of the White House military. So a lot of the situation that you see here, it's really an event that happened, and then people start taking notice, and then once they start taking notice, they start moving forward with the action to remediate those issues.
Wow, and those are big, complex issues, obviously. Where do you see the CISO leaders in terms of offering control?
It's you can see that happened to Colonial Pipeline somewhere, the cyber attack to Ukraine. Seeing that awareness being on cyber point that SEC for the CISO to the board, CISO of the necessary authority to inform the board on what's going on. So I'll give you one example. When I was working at HUB back in 2020, our SOC team was able to stop a nation-state sponsored attack simply by creating this dashboard and take the necessary action based on what was going on within our network environment. So the bottom line is that the CISOs need to have the necessary way of communicating to the board. And a lot of time that those communication comes derived from dashboard or derived from some sort of a concise way of presenting information to foster better communication, as well as making a decisive action when something occurred.
Right, so they really need to have that understanding of the attack surface and see what kind of risk that's presenting. And I guess, as we talk about digital transformation, we know that one of the areas that affects the most is cloud and cloud native application, rapid development, DevOps. And we also have, cloud leaders who may not want security to slow them down. So how does an IT security leader get involved with those cloud projects?
Yeah, this is something that the CISO needs to work closely with the CIO and vice versa. So when I was working at HUB, we actually modernized a mainframe-based, paper-based capability, which was built back in 1970s, 1980s. We basically moved everything to the cloud, and this overall project, it's responsible for $1.3 trillion of U.S. mortgage. So you understand the impact to the economy if there's some situation that happened with this capability. So with that said, along the way, I work hand in hand with the CISO to make sure that he knows exactly what's going on, how the design is going to be properly implemented, and making sure that we have proper security assessment, proper security control in place, and at the same time, the proper documentation. So to alleviate any potential issues, as well as ways that we can go through continuous monitoring for any cyber threats. So the outcome of it was that we're able to revamp the capability and then really improve the organizational efficiency by saving the overall mortgage industry, $200 million a year.
Wow. So I think we all, imagine these issues that government. I love you're able to minimize that. I think there's a lot of people who work for commercial and biz think that experience in the private industry.
Understand the motivation, experience from both sides. So understand the ways that or the cyber to any corporation. If you understand the motivation, usually driven, or potentially that it's a of information, that the cyber threat will put on using the weakest. So understand as knowing security world, it's somebody's going to make sure that it's always inside so by understanding that I would say that for any corporations, any government entities, it's the same across the board. It's exactly the same across the board. And the way to mature the overall posture, the cyber hygiene, is actually focusing on people, process, and technology. The enhancement of each area actually goes hand in hand. You could have the greatest technology, but if you don't have the necessary people with knowledge, or if you don't have the process to tie into the technology, you're not going to be successful. So the bottom line is that we need to look at all three different areas and then be able to move forward together.
Wow. So yeah, people, process, technology always comes into play, and those challenges really do sound universal. I think that's the great thing about this event, is that people can connect with peers across industries and learn from each other. I want to thank you for kickstarting our conversation today and sharing your perspectives. And again, a warm welcome to Trend Micro. I know you haven't been here long, but you've already met with some customers. And you know, if there are customers out there who think David could help you with your research and your understanding of your risk environment, you know, feel free to contact your local Trend Micro account executive and get you in touch. Excellent. Well, thank you so much, David. You know, I think what we highlighted so far is that it's really important to be able to understand and assess the risk in your environment. And it does start with that understanding. And so to help us with this environment, I would like to invite our next stage, the VP through Perspektifler Industry on Risk. Welcome to joining us.
I am. It's fun to get out of the country. So yeah, thanks for the intro. And we're going to dive in with a group of really interesting experts who are going to help us understand this challenge of attack surface management from a variety of perspectives. First up, we're going to hear from one of our customers, Chai Panamnami. Now, he's based in Australia, so I caught up with him a few days ago, and let's have a listen. Hi, I'm Eric Skinner. I'm Vice President of Market Strategy at Trend Micro, and I'm delighted to be joined today by Chai Panamnani, the CTO of Sandstone. And we're going to chat a little bit about what goes on with respect to risk assessment in Sandstone. So Chai, thank you so much for being here with us today. Can you tell us a little bit about Sandstone?
Thanks, Eric, and it's always a pleasure to talk to you about security. There's never a dull moment in those conversations. Hi, I'm Chaitanya Pinamneni, CTO for Sandstone Technology. It's a fintech organization that's been building banking and financial products for financial customers for over 2 decades in Australia and UK market. And we primarily work around the banks and solutions around lending and digital banking and providing customer interfaces for the banks to service their clients. So as you can see, it's a heavily regulated industry, and it's a lot of fun innovating in this space nowadays.
Sounds like it, and certainly lots of attackers are out there who are interested in what potential target you might be. So you've been going through a fairly substantial transition to the cloud. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, Eric. It's, as everyone finds out during their journey, and we did so, that the slowest speed of the team is the one that holds back your innovation. And for us, it worked out to be the computing space and how we move about with the cloud. And in 2018, we made the decision to go fully cloud native and build our platform on AWS. And one of the reasons we chose cloud versus doing on-prem was so we can focus our energy on doing things we do best, which is building the products and providing our customers with a service while letting the partners do the heavy lifting. And it's been a challenging journey, but also very rewarding. All the initial roadblocks that people had, primarily because it was a new technology, the risk was not properly assessed, and there were not that many examples in the world. I'm happy to report back to say all those objections have gone away. People see the value, and we're moving heavily into the zero trust model. And I'm happy to say that we are seeing the benefits of it as of today in managing our risk, in managing our pipeline of work, and being able to innovate at a really fast speed.
So when you think about the combination of cloud assets now that you've got, as well as some of the existing on-premise assets that haven't yet migrated or not going to be migrated, how have you dealt with the challenge of, first of all, just getting visibility over what assets you have?
It's an interesting challenge, Eric, and if you don't mind, I would like to put an analogy that we use in the software world between the servers being pets and cattle. So the on-prem servers, we treat them as pets. We name them, we look after them, and when you get sick, the doctors or the engineers go and make everything they do to bring them back to life. That means you have limited numbers. You know them, or you think you know them. At least that's what I would say. And then you go to cloud, where it's more like a cattle ranch, where cattle come and go. They're like a business. The hundreds of them are at any point of time.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where what we found was the traditional methods of looking after your inventory and how you record what you have and where the current status is do not work for cloud. Because it's a complete paradigm shift from thinking about naming your servers to more managing them. And you need better tooling to be able to articulate how do you label them, where the state is, which condition they are in, what kind of a data they hold. So what we found was the challenge was, how do you manage all these assets out there in the cloud? Could be anywhere in any country location where you put a VPC in, but at the same time, how do you leverage the power of it? Because knowing your assets will give you the right amount of risk management techniques to say where you focus. And what we found the challenge was moving from the traditional methodologies to adopting to what cloud recommends. And that's where our most friction was, giving up old technologies and old ways of doing, convincing all the departments, saying this is the new way of doing things, getting all the other parties other than my engineering team, which was ready to change its processes, but convincing all the other parties to come on this journey and adopt this new way of managing your assets in the cloud. So I would say it's been very hard to do that, but once we had implemented all the required technologies and labeling and very good practices using infrastructure as code, I can say that we have full visibility in cloud. And in fact, I would go further to say, if you do not have 100% visibility in cloud, you're not doing it right. You cannot be without 100% visibility in cloud. That's as simple as it goes.
And yet you would probably guess that a lot of organizations out there are not yet at the level of visibility that you've achieved.
I would think so, Eric. Anyone who's sticking to traditional methods and technologies and still treating the servers as pet is eventually going to run into the human problem is you can only remember so much, you can make mistakes, and if you have things being recorded, they will never reflect the current state. So I agree with that. And I believe most organizations are now realizing that as your number of digital assets grow up in the cloud, you need new technologies and partners to help you manage and understand the risk around them.
That's right. So let's chat a little bit about risk now. First of all, one of the risks would be you don't even know what assets you've got, but we've covered that. One of the issues that people like to understand is vulnerabilities across their environment, vulnerability assessment, which can be very noisy and very overwhelming. What's been your experience with respect to getting a grip on vulnerabilities in your hybrid environment?
Well, it's an interesting topic, Eric, which I feel in the last few years, we've gone from not caring or to almost caring to panicking now. With the number of vulnerabilities that are coming out right, left, and center from all the major technology vendors, and most of them CVE ratings are pretty high, means we are finding the directors of the company, the executives are quite rightly concerned, and so are the customers. And it's an unending barrage of things being thrown at the cybersecurity and the engineers to say, how does this affect you? And of course, it's a complicated issue for the one simple thing. A vulnerability has a lot of other characteristics that defines how it affects you. And that's the context that's really important, whether you apply the context from an engineering perspective or exploitation, the scope, availability, or the simple fact that attack vector, whether it's applicable to you or not. What we're finding with that is that now you do need some expertise in this area to understand the world, the engineering concepts, and to be able to then use all of this to make a realistic assessment. The reason being, those days of fixing every vulnerability in this short period of time is gone. Now, all we are doing is managing the really high ones that does affect us, prioritizing them, while the other ones, more of the things that don't really affect you, but it still is available in your stack, we're taking an approach of more, either we're redesigning that vulnerability out of the stack, or we're taking an approach of upgrading libraries over a period of time rather than rushing into. So the experience has been managing stakeholders, communicating with customers, but most importantly, really understanding how the vulnerability affects you so you can prioritize how you're going to fix it.
Right, and that prioritization concept is becoming so important, not only in the context of vulnerabilities, but just assessing risk even more broadly. When you are trying to get a sense of the risks in your environment, vulnerabilities, lack of visibility, threats in the environment, and so on, how do you synthesize all of that? And do you have to do a lot of manual work?
Currently, yes, but we are, I would always say, we meditate. We literally meditate to try and make sense of this chaos. And when I say meditate, it's a joint cybersecurity team exercise we have built. What we do is on a regular basis, we meet together with calm minds, with no panic. And we do these times when there's no active vulnerability, so we can actually talk about how things are. And each part of the partner then picks a part of the world we operate in and then talks about where he sees the risk is. And we use these mechanisms and SWOT analysis to come up with a list of vulnerabilities we believe affects us. And this is the hard part, Eric. What we have to do is based on all the noise. And this is the important part. This noise is coming from expert people really understand technology, but maybe not my company. So they are telling us the right things. And we are sitting there listing out all the things that's going in the world, trying to make sense of it, then end up prioritizing based on simple concepts of workload security. Like one of the things I would say is, as a sandstone company, we at very early on, when we got onto our ISO processes, we define what's most important to the company, whether it's the IP, the digital assets, or the data. And it turns out our workload security was the topmost priority for us, as in the data was the most important thing. And that means is the mechanism we picked up is a quite well-known CIA mechanism, which looks at the confidentiality of data, integrity of the data, and availability. And we use that mechanism to prioritize risks to say, if it affects any one of these, then it's really on the higher priority. If it does not affect CIA, we then deprioritize it. And that's something we had to work based on our knowledge, our customer needs, and our management's and companies' willingness to spend money or fix bugs, and the speed with which move. We ended up coming with the metrics that cybersecurity team maintains, and based on that, now we provide context to the rest of the organization about how fast or how quickly the vulnerability needs to be, patched, fixed, or taken out of the stack based on how it impacts the workload.
Well, thank you so much, Chai, for sharing your experience and these stories with us. That's great context with respect to how an organization has to deal with visibility and risk assessment. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Eric. And as I always said, it's always a pleasure having these conversations with you.
All right. Well, I loved Chai's point about meditating on some of these challenges. And next up, we've got a guy who has definitely meditated about a lot of interesting problems related to figuring out which devices on the internet belong to particular organizations and the asset discovery problem more broadly. So I'm happy to be joined by Jeremiah Grossman. Previously to his current gig, he was the co-founder of White Hat Security, and now he is the CEO and co-founder of BitDiscovery, a new Trend Micro partner. Hello, Jeremiah.
Hey, Eric. Good to be with you.
Super happy that you were able to join us. So, hey, let's dive in. What makes this attack surface management problem so challenging?
I guess it's been said, it's been the perennial problem of information security for years. It was supposed to be the first thing we did as a security industry, find out what we're meant to protect. And it just happens to be the one thing we didn't do yet, but we're on our way.
Yeah, and there's really two spheres that barely touch until perhaps something later in today's program. But there's the challenge of figuring out which assets are inside your network, and all the different devices that you might have there, and then those that are facing the internet. How come those problems are different?
When an external adversary first looks at an organization, they're first going to look at, okay, what are all the assets, the hosts and servers, what are the open ports, and what are the software that we can first establish a beachhead. So that's the first thing an attacker will do, is they'll do recon and they'll exploit an external system and establish that beachhead. Excuse me. The next thing they'll do is then they'll start moving laterally across the inside of the network, which is a completely different set of challenges. So it's really different because the way you go about doing attack surface management from the external point of view, the techniques to do it internal are night and day different. So you kind of have to separate them. They're both very important, don't get me wrong, but they are very distinct.
Yeah, and those external facing assets are obviously juicy and vulnerable because an attacker can hit them from around the world and try out various things. But you also need to know what's inside your environment. And inside your environment, people used to try to solve that by scanning the environment. But SaaS and in particular work from home has really evolved that internal problem, hasn't it?
Big time. So the internet got really big, really fast, very disorganized. Bit Discovery has found something to the neighborhood of 6.5 billion assets online. So the average enterprise, they'll buy companies, decommission companies, spin things out, test environments, dev systems, host cloud, and it ends up being a very wide, distributed, and disorganized attack surface space. So the standard way of starting with some seed data and then crawling from a single point of IP space just doesn't really work. Turns out the best and easiest way is to first have a copy of the internet and then search search in it.
Yeah, you've pretty much built kind of a specialized Google. You haven't got a copy of all the content and an index of all the content, but you've got all that metadata and all that device information. It's pretty cool. And when we do think about this work from home challenge, I mean, one of the problems we've seen is people who used to use scanning inside their network. Well, obviously somebody's working from home and they've got a laptop connected to Office 365. That network scanner isn't going to see them. But, various other approaches are starting to evolve where, you can query Office 365 and query some of these other assets or some of these other applications in your environment to figure out who else is connecting. So why did you, with the founding of Bit Discovery, why did you choose to tackle this external facing asset challenge in particular?
Great question. And Bit Discovery was, for this reason, a decade in the making. So when I was with White Hat Security, we were in the business of website vulnerability management, finding vulnerabilities in websites so they can get fixed. And our customers would routinely ask us, we would like for you to scan all of our websites. And we're great, we can do that. Can you give us the list of your websites? And literally none of them could. So they would go can you help us with that? And we tried many different ways, like our peers and competitors tried many different ways. And it ended up being a deceptively hard problem just to find a list of websites. So White Hat and every single one of our customers in the Fortune 500 had this issue. So when I left White Hat, it was, I was going to solve this one problem. If I can solve just one problem, what would it be? The biggest, most important unsolved problem was, at least from that background, was we don't know what we're meant to protect yet. So if I can solve that one problem, we can save a whole lot of breaches because we know that asset's there, it's vulnerable to this issue, and just patch them like the rest. And then we'll really move the needle in InfoSec.
Yeah, because it's challenging to assess risk in your organization if you don't even have visibility, you're not even looking at some particular assets. And what are some of the reasons that some of these assets are going to be a surprise to organizations?
So we at Bit Discovery, when we do demos for customers and we show them the data that we have, usually we can start with a singular domain name, find all the other domain names they own, and generate an attack surface map. Once you have that map, they might have, some have thousands, tens of thousands, even hundreds of thousands of assets. And then you can start, it's the first time ever that you've got a real good look at it. And almost without exception, the meeting will stop and go, wait a minute, that's online? I didn't know we have that dev server there or that test server there. There's RDP listening there and the meeting stops and somebody has to go address it. But those are just some of the experiences. Like you'll find dev servers, test servers, just all sorts of things that you wouldn't think are exposed, and no company is any exception. And there's just a lot of assets out there that come and go without warning.
Yeah, and what are some of the reasons that that a company might find itself with something on the internet that they weren't expecting? Is it still things like shadow IT? Is it contractors? What kind of stuff do you see?
It's all of the above. So we'll pick on the development group. So development group might stand up a QA or a staging system because they're about to go live. So they'll temporarily set up the new version. They'll test it. and then they'll backport the code to production, but not take down the test server. That might be one reason. Or they might set up a demonstration environment for a customer and not take it down later. The marketing team will pick on them. The marketing team might go to a cloud service, swipe a credit card, bypass IT, and launch something in the cloud with no knowledge or insight from the security team. That would be another one. Firewall rules change, things go up and down. There's all sorts of reasons why assets might go around, and to the confusion of everyone. And that right there is really important. What we find at Bit Discovery is that there's about a 1 to 5% drift per month in the change rate of the average attack surface. If you don't mind, let me go through that just a little bit. Services will go, assets will come and go. Open ports or services will come and go. And then the software needs service will come and go. So if you track all that over time, there's a constant change rate. So like everything in security, attack surface management can't just be a moment in time. Ideally, you want to monitor it daily for the change rate so you can act upon something that may be out of compliance policy or risky.
Yeah, surprises are always going to pop up. It's definitely not a one-time thing. So yeah, a little bit later in the program, our audience is going to hear about us doing something special together between Trend Micro and Bit Discovery. It's been really fun working with you on that. And it'll be great to see a demo later in the program of how we're blending some of your data with some of our insights, and I'm looking forward to see that demo. So thanks a bunch for popping on here and sharing your insights with us. Really appreciate it, Jeremiah.
My pleasure. Excited to be working with you, Eric, and on Trend Micro. We're going to do great things.
I think we are. All right. Well, next up, I've got a group of 3 Trend Micro experts who are going to help with their perspective on this challenge, not just the challenge of how to address attack surface management, but really pivoting over to, well, how are attackers taking advantage of this challenge? So we've got Chris Lafleur from our incident response team in the Americas, as well as Mila Pilau from our threat research team and threat marketing team. And we've got Rick Ferguson also from the threat research organization. So thank you, all 3 of you, for coming and sharing your perspectives. Let's start with you, Chris. So your team deals with lots of challenging incidents, customers who have ended up in trouble for a variety of different reasons. I'm curious to hear from you, Chris. Is there a common thread with respect to how these incidents start? How do the attackers initiate these attacks?
So it comes down to two methods. It's either an email attack campaign starts off and unmanaged vulnerability assets, and it's a 50% on both sides, right? On which one is successful.
Yeah, it was stunning to me when you were telling me that earlier, because you would think it would be a wide range of reasons and methods that these attackers would initiate, and yet when things get messy, half of the time it's because people didn't understand that they had a particular asset facing the internet, and it's kind of shocking to me. And at the same time, maybe based on what we just heard from Jeremiah, it's something that comes up far more often than we'd expect. How do these unknown assets get, or these weak configurations, how do they help attackers?
So what's amazing about these vulnerabilities is that if I can get your asset and gain access to it with a beachhead, like was being said before, I can skip most of my lateral movement of trying to get into the core of your network, right? These servers typically have trust relationships directly back to their domain controller. So I'm 1 or 2 steps away from taking over the entire network, which allows me to,
How are these attacks changing in the few years that you've been doing incident response?
So we can say they're definitely getting faster and more organized. The threat actors have definitely gotten their game plan out, and you can really start to stamp who did what just by what tools are being dropped and utilized in the network. For example, I was reading a DFIR report earlier today, and they went from breach to full-blown network ransomware in 4 hours.
Yeah, and that might have been days previously. So it really is important to try to shore up the defenses in advance. Well, thank you, Chris, for sharing the incident response insight. Next up, Mila. So again, you're from the threat marketing organization, Threat Communications. You help put out all these blogs and reports on what kind of activity that we're seeing out there in the threat landscape. So what can you tell us about the changes that you're seeing in attacker behavior over the last little while?
Thanks, Eric. Obviously, there's a massive digital migration. We know that already. So what we've seen so far is malicious actors are really very quick to pivot in inherent capabilities on securing the clouds. We've seen a couple of increases. About 65% of what we've seen are caused by misconfiguration. And you and I know that misconfiguration can be a common problem, or what we can probably say a really good pathway to some of attacks, like, breaching the server, blocking the data, or even launching a more complex attack. So that's one of the biggest things that we see. The other one I'd like to mention also is as the internet obviously evolves and innovate, new technologies comes in, it also serves as a huge battleground for a lot of the malicious actors. We've seen demands on offensive tools, and we all know that offensive tools are very dangerous in the sense that they will really narrow on ultra targeted campaigns. So this is one of the things that we see, and techniques that they're using right now is not too complex. These are really breaking into free webmail, scanning social media accounts, or really targeting flaws in the corporate email account. So those are two big things that we've seen so far.
And what are your quick thoughts on changes or serious leading gaps in security posture? What kind of data do we have on that?
That's a very good question. What we know is that the earlier that we are able to detect threats in the earlier cycle means there will be less capability and negative consequences to attacks. In our findings, specifically on the risk insights portion, we've seen that the average security posture of a lot of organizations around 53%. What we don't know is that number can be a little bit average, but it can tell a lot of stories. So if we double click on that, what we've seen so far is a majority of this high risk, and when we scan the customer environment, is actually associated with exposure layer. What does it mean is that this is attributed to almost 49% to highly exploitable vulnerabilities. And that's a big thing. This means that a lot of our customers, a lot of the networks are really exploitable just because of the exposure of vulnerabilities that can both be in the wild. It can also mean that a lot of this have proven methodologies in terms of an attack path, or it's just really very easy for a lot of this exploit or vulnerabilities to penetrate our organization. So this is what we're seeing at the moment. So, and we think criminals will continue to hound on vulnerabilities. And we've obviously seen that numbers to at least double up as we are just probably not even middle of the year right now.
All right. Well, thank you, Mila. And last but not least, Rick Ferguson, who is certainly the face of Trend Micro on many, many online videos on YouTube, but also part of the threat research team. Rick, who are these attackers anyway, and does that matter with respect to what a security team needs to do?
Yeah, I mean, attribution is one of the perennial questions in our industry. We've had these ongoing discussions about, does attribution really matter? For sure, attribution is difficult. I think that's widely accepted. I mean, we see criminals using false flag operations, using rented infrastructure that could be anywhere in the globe, even criminal groups hijacking infrastructure that belongs to other criminal groups. We've seen Russian criminals, for example, using Iranian criminal infrastructure. And even if you can pinpoint the infrastructure, it's then just as difficult, if not more difficult, to say, well, whose fingers were on the keyboard in the first place? And then another question over and above that, well, who directed these people to put their fingers on the keyboard in the first place? There are layers and layers of barriers to attribution. So for sure, it's difficult. It's critical. You ask, is it important or not? It's critical for law enforcement. If you want to take enforcement activity It's critical for international relations, but very often in both of those cases, it's met with disinformation or flat out denial anyway, and there are plenty of places to hide. So absolutely it's important and it has its role. I think the definition of attribution really matters. Are you saying we want to attribute something to a specific individual or group of individuals, or do you want to attribute something to a notional group of individuals, a threat actor, if you like? So I think deciding on what you mean by attribution is really important. It really helps. Attribution on that level really helps an organization in terms of being able to work out if you're being targeted by a given threat actor, what are the techniques they usually use? Where do your vulnerabilities lie? How can you react more effectively to that? And how do their tactics change over time? How can your tactics change over time? The full story, at the end of the day, when you're reporting to a board, should always include the who. I think as practitioners, we like to focus on the how, because that informs very clearly how we can protect against things. But if you're not also trying to answer that question of who, you're just focusing on the how. But if you miss out the who and the why, then the you from the FUD will always be part of your reports to the board. There will always be uncertainty, and people want those questions answered. So it's important for sure. And one of the tools that we've seen recently that really helps pinpoint where we need to focus our attention comes from the MITRE ATT&CK clustering. Finding those TTPs, finding those methodologies, clustering them, identifying threat groups, and allowing you to visualize and prioritize more effectively your defenses against those threat actors. Sorry, that was a massive brain dump, but I knew I only had 3 minutes. There you go.
Well, we're probably not going to touch on the next question, but I think you summed up pretty well, actually, why it's important to have a lot of information at your disposal so that software and your own teams are able to prioritize, because that avalanche of data is just coming at you daily. And so prioritization is one of the topics that's coming right up. Thank you, all three of you, for sharing your perspectives, and we're going to pass it back to Leah.
Thank you so much, Eric, and your panel of experts for really helping us understand the complexities of that digital attack surface, and certainly the range of assets out there, whether it be internal or external, and of course the range of vulnerabilities and threats that put those assets at risk. Now, we know that understanding and assessing risk is only part of the challenge. A lot of IT security leaders have a hard time, again, quantifying or demonstrating that risk exposure and then communicating that risk. So now here to join us and explain a little bit more on how to communicate risk is Greg Young, who's our VP of Cybersecurity, and he's joined by Andrea Berg of Arjo. Greg, welcome to Perspectives.
Hello, my name is Greg Young, and I am Vice President of Cybersecurity for Trend Micro. And I am very excited today to have Andrea Berg from Arjo with me today. Hi, Andrea.
Hi, Greg. Nice to meet you, and I'm looking forward to talk to you today.
Yeah, it's great to see you again. And please tell me a bit about yourself and about Arjo.
Yeah, happy to do so. So Arjo supports healthcare givers in long and acute care facilities to drive healthier outcome for people with mobility changes, with processes, training, and our equipment. We have our headquarters in Sweden. Main markets are North America and Europe, but overall sales companies in around about 100 countries. As you said, my name is Andrea Berg. I'm the Chief Information Officer for Arjo, and I have a team of around 120 people working with me to support Arjo with IT solutions, and of course at the same time protecting our systems and taking care of IT security. Maybe a few more words to our business. We have capital sales, as you would usually probably expect. We also have service business. And a bit more special, we also have quite a large portion of rental business. And rental business is a bit special. We are getting requests for goods from the customer on very short notice. So this business is running 24/7, 365 days a year. And we are supporting customers, for example, with medical beds and mattresses to treat patients after a surgery, for example, to get the vital functions and the mobility back. And this business, as you can imagine, is quite challenging from IT perspective. We need all systems up and running, and we also need to be IT security, to the point to be able to run our systems non-stop, more or less.
Right, and you've been with Arjo for some time too, as in technology with them, haven't you?
Yes, I've been now 18 years, more or less, with the company in various roles. Grown with the IT, and IT landscape, as we all know, has changed quite significantly. And I think the turnaround is going faster and faster.
So you're communicating with the board to tell them not only about the IT requirements and your planning and priorities, but also, of course, about cybersecurity. We've seen communication with the board and how that is done radically change over the last, certainly the last even 5 years. For your own experience, what have you seen change, and what are some of your success tactics for communicating with the board and also hearing from them about what their concerns are, especially around cybersecurity?
Yeah, communication is absolute key. And as you say, we have different audience, like the board of directors, audit committee, management, but also employees, as well as external partner, and also our customer. Customer in healthcare, data can be quite sensitive. So also their communication is key to build trust and good connection. As you say, the communication has changed. In the, you can say, old days or a few years ago, IT security was much about backup and recovery, and that you could handle IT internal and with some communication to the top management, of course. Now, with the double extortion and ransom attacks, it involves everyone. It is not exclusive to a group. So communication nowadays involves all management, all of our bodies, but also all employees, because everyone plays a part and has a certain responsibility here.
Yeah, that's really interesting. You mentioned sort of the three constituencies or groups that the board, IT staff, employees. I guess four with customers as well. That's four very different kinds of messaging communications that you have to do. And it used to be that people weren't that sort of savvy or knowledgeable about IT security, but they are now, and that must really change how you have to communicate with these groups and the types of questions they ask you or demands they make on you as well.
Yeah, management is usually interested, in a high-level overview over our framework, and our framework consists of processes, training, and the tools. And yeah, you need to be a little bit balanced, which language you use to give them a good grip over our IT security, not to use too much of our IT security language, but also explain it in words that are a little bit easier to understand. And, you can use analogies for that, what I quite often prefer, to give some practical examples to them. IT security, you can compare it with a house. You lock your door, and you maybe even put a camera on, or put a security guard in front of it. And I think this is what happened with IT security, you know. I mean, we have the basics, the firewalls, the MFA, the access controls, which are the basics, you know. But nowadays that is not enough. So now we have put a camera on, and we have put a security guard in front of the door. And responsibilities of everyone is, of course, not to keep the door open, you know, to close the door, to stick to the principles. And all of that is what need to be covered in the communication to make it somehow visible, because, you know, cyber threats, that is a bit the tricky thing, is invisible. You can't see it. You know, I mean, it is a little bit tricky to explain to somebody how dangerous is public Wi-Fi. I mean, they can't see it. You know, it's happening in the background, and that is a little bit the challenge here, to explain something that you can't see.
And I guess you're also the translator, having to explain the business requirements and the sort of the customer requirements to the technology staff as well, that we get so hung up in technology. You're also the person who's going to be, you know, communicating to the technology teams and security about what the business and the customer compliance, those needs are, things outside technology.
Absolutely. I mean, different audience need different kind of communication, where you really stick more to the words, to the tools, you know, to the technologies that they want to hear, that they want to see. And we are using all kind of channels also to communicate. Of course, we have the usual PowerPoints, you know, explaining our framework, the tools, name it, the processes, the playbooks that we have. But we also use emailing, we use our intranet, we use personal meetings, and also conversations at the coffee machine are utmost important, you know, to explain certain things in a more informal way, you know, to keep the attention and also the awareness.
Yeah, there's multiple ways of doing it. That's so key now, to keep people's attention as they're bombarded. Last time we spoke, you said something really interesting about that. It used to be that, you know, how it's changed, that it's now a case of senior management often asking, you know, what more can we do around security, rather than why are we doing that? Could you talk more about how you've seen those changes around, you know, senior folks in business, especially, who generally are very aware now of security, and how that's changed your job?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that is a question that senior management indeed ask, you know, are we doing enough? And I usually say, you know, you can never do enough. I mean, this is something that is changing so quickly. There is an entire, you can say, hacker business working against us, you know, always finding new vulnerabilities and way of implementing raising ransomware. So you always need to be switched on and look around, stay connected, investigate the new trends. And I think here also communication is key. Communication with external partner, with other companies, just to stay connected and learn from each other. You know, that's I think the best you can look at it. You need to be completely open, because we all don't know what's around, what comes next.
Yeah, we often say in security we have no competitors. As a CIO or CAISO, we're all in this together, and we're just you know, any bad things that happen are not good for anybody in the business or for people, because they're often going to have many devices supporting them.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And also for this, how smart devices get now as well, that must have really changed sort of in the medical landscape, where it used to be just sort of, you know, the things on our desktops that we would use, that would be the limit of technology. But now the scope has changed so much, to so many devices, and, you know, and things that are now smart, intelligent, and we have to be concerned about.
Absolutely. In the meantime, it impacts all devices, all channels. I mean, they are working, of course, with a PC, but also iPad, iPhones, everything, and that need to cover a wider range. You know, as I say, you can't work just with a backup and recovery strategy anymore. You know, you need to have more, you need to have the 360-degree view, more or less, and you need a constant monitoring service, because it's also nearly impossible to keep pace with all the vulnerabilities and do all of the patching and upgrading in time, and when you get notifications like 0 day, I mean, with all the systems and the wide landscape, you also need some time for testing, and we are in healthcare business, so we also need to be compliant. So monitoring service is utmost important. That is what I say is now the camera in front of the door and the security guard, because you can't simply rely on backups and recovery and your firewalls and everything else.
Yeah, I really like your use of analogies and stressing that. It used to be we always used car analogies, it seemed, in security, and now we find ourselves using house analogies more. They're certainly better for a lot of architectures, that's true. Any sort of advice you could give just to close this out to any of our, the CIOs and CISOs that are watching? Any sort of tips for communication or any observations you have that you'd like to leave them with?
Use and try all all options, I mean, for different people, different ways of communication works, We also present sometimes in a condensed ways the do's and don'ts, or doing quiz at the end of a training. It depends on the audience, if it's a wider audience, if it's employees, we are trying to do it also a little bit in a more entertaining way. For senior management and partners, of course, it is a little bit more serious and focused on the facts, And in general, I think it is utmost important really to communicate also with the community and stay connected, learn from the community, learn from what others are doing, and then check and decide what you can adapt.
Oh, that's great advice, and I wish we had an hour more to speak. I learn so much every time I speak with you, but during this time we have, I really want to thank you for talking to me and everybody else at Perspectives, and I really look forward to us meeting again. So thank you very much again.
Thank you, Greg. It was nice talking to you, and happy to talk again. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Greg and Andrea. I loved that conversation. I loved reflecting back on how much IT security has changed from the days of backup and recovery to now much more modern IT security needs, and the need to communicate not just to management, not just to the board, but to everyone, because everyone is involved. Some great tips from Andrea there as well in terms of keeping the language simple, using analogies. That house analogy, as we know, is becoming more popular for talking about that attack surface and the different ways of protecting that. So I really appreciate that discussion. Now that we've had a chance to talk about understanding and assessing risk, communicating risk, of course, we get to a very important discussion, and that's how to mitigate that risk. To lead that discussion, I'd like to invite Mike Gibson to the stage, and he's joined by Calvin Garrison from Targa, and they're going to talk about how to mitigate risk. Mike, welcome to the stage.
Hi everyone, Mike Gibson here, Vice President of Customer Success and Security Research for Trend Micro. Today I'm joined with Calvin Garrison, Senior Director of Security Governance and Operations with Targa Resources. Hey Calvin, how are you?
Good, Mike. How are you today?
Very good, thanks. Really appreciate you taking the time to be with us today. Hoping to kind of pick your brain as it relates to risk mitigation and some of the stuff that you guys are doing over there at Targa. But to kick things off, would you mind just a brief introduction of Targa Resources?
You bet. Targa Resources is a leading midstream energy services company in North America. We take our jobs and our responsibility seriously, and to a large degree that includes protecting our assets through cybersecurity.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure you must see some interesting and unique threats in that space for sure. And obviously, you know, securing them would be a top priority for your company and for many of us. So
it certainly is. Yeah.
And yeah, as I mentioned, you know, the reason we were hoping to have you on today was to share a little bit about your insights when it comes to dealing with threats and risk mitigation. And as with many things, being able to do this comes down to that combination of people, process, technology. And you and I first got introduced because your team was working on some of those efforts to optimize the technology investment, a strategy around turning your individual security stack pieces into an ecosystem, having them, you know, operate together for automation, orchestration, and so forth. Can you share a little bit about, you know, the strategy and what led you down that journey and how things are going?
Sure. Actually, that journey began back in maybe the 90s or something like that. Cybersecurity, information security, it's been an evolution. It's warfare, really, and so there's always defense and attack. And throughout that journey, we've seen our sector, information security, grow and evolve. And so we continue to look forward to what's next, what are the current threats, what's next, and then how do we, one, protect against current threats, two, plan to protect against the emerging threat landscape. And where we started, where anyone started, everyone, was individual layers of security. And where I see that evolving is interconnected layers of security throughout anyone's architecture where they're trying to protect their organization. And so much of where you and I come together, where we've met, is us discussing the interconnected layers of security that Trend is offering and how we best utilize that for our security analysts.
Yeah, excellent. And I know that you know, your team was really doing some unique things as far as, or some kind of advanced things as far as being able to take data in, you know, analyze it, use automation to analyze it, use orchestration to kick off tasks and pieces, and semi-automate activities, so that you know, you're not trying to solve these problems with people. And as we know, you know, connecting a bunch of disparate systems together is not always easy. You know, there's going to be challenges there. What kind of, you know, what are at a high level, what are some of the challenges you face as you work with these security stacks and trying to get them to operate as a single unit?
Yeah, well, Mike, I know my team can be demanding. They're always wanting something, more integrations, more capability, and requests come in. And you guys have been great about that customization, that where it makes sense, where we put in a request, very quick response. Trend looks to see if that fits within the vision, whether it's good for other customers. And we've seen so many of our requests being built out into the finalized product. Where anyone's going to have a challenge is taking all of your security stack, all of your layers of protection, all of your layers of telemetry, and it may not necessarily be a security product, but just anything where you can gain some more insight, and bringing that into a console for an analyst to be able to see and make decisions upon. And then when you get into that space, you're talking about billions of events over even a short period of time, and being able to improve upon all of that telemetry to bubble up the things that go bump in the night, the things that you need to take either automated response actions to, or get that in front of an analyst to make a decision. That's the challenge I think that everyone's facing today.
Yeah, absolutely. And it kind of, you know, the interactions I've had with your team have also kind of brought up some of the I wouldn't say people challenges, but the evolution of some of the roles within security, which is, you need a little bit of development experience. You need to touch on Python. You need to touch on some of these scripting languages to be able to, leverage the interfaces available to connect these dots. And so, you don't have to be experts, but you need to understand it well enough to be able to maybe help guide what the solution should ultimately look like. And I know that, is that something your people have evolved into, or is it something you had hired for? Just on the people side, when it comes to integration and that type of work, is that something what has been your approach?
We've got some pretty sharp cats on our team, and so that type of development, is key. That type of customization in anyone's environment is important. But actually, I see it getting easier through the use of APIs and particular fields. It's getting far more simple, far easier. You don't have to have that super high level coding expertise or language expertise to be able to connect to another source of information automatically and pull in the fields of information that you need to make decisions upon. And much of what we use, those types of integrations are becoming more and more simple every day.
Oh, that's excellent. That's great to hear. We don't want to have to, hiring for security teams is already hard enough. To add, strong development capabilities, and it would get even more difficult and challenging to find some of these resources. So that's good to hear that the technology is helping simplify that. As you're on this journey of turning your security stack into an ecosystem, can you share with us any of the benefits you're seeing as a result of this approach? What are, or even just as you're able to semi-automate or automate tasks, what does that allow your team to shift focus to, and things that they can do now that they would have had to spend significant time on before?
Yeah, you bet. I think analysts throughout since the 90s, you've been going to a particular layer of security. You've been going to a particular product, and you've been working in that tool and refining it and looking at the information in that tool. And then you go to 5 other tools and 5 other layers and have to dig into that and then correlate all that in your head. It's a lot of administration and an impossible task. Now, SIMs, a good SIM made that easier. What we're seeing today, 2022, is all of these layers of security being interconnected, and the ease of which we can connect all of that signaling, bringing it into one console, performing automated actions to match against updated threat intelligence from hundreds of different sources, enrich data on IOCs, and then present that to perform some automated actions, response actions, and then present all of that to an analyst to make further decisions. It's amazing. It's getting better and better. That type of automation, that type of integrated, interconnected technology is allowing security analysts to spend a lot more time hunting threats and less time writing code and tweaking and normal administration, the grunt work.
Oh, that's excellent. Yeah, just being able to, even as we've talked about in the past, semi-automate a task, be able to get presented with the information they need to make a quick decision and move on, and then maybe pivot, to your point, enrich that event, pivot to doing some threat hunting, more proactive activities inside your environment to see, what is this telling me and how can I go further investigate that? That's great sharing. Thank you very much. As I know there are others on this journey as well to integrate and really, turn their individual products into an ecosystem. Do you have any tips you could share with the audience on I know it's been a long journey, you mentioned the 90s, but, more recently as the technology's improved, do you have any tips on how, your approach and how you work with the vendors or anything like that?
Yeah, I dated myself with the 90s comment there. But going back, you see, it's an evolution. If you think about it, everything we do within this space to protect our organizations changes. It evolves on a daily, on a monthly basis or so. You're always responding to what's next and preparing for what's next. And I believe it's very important that we don't rely upon a single layer of technology. We all know that, but key going forward, and this is my opinion, key going forward is the integration of all of those layers. No one person can do that by themselves. So you're going to need, leaders are going to need to take all of those layers of technology and make sure they work together. Don't have your humans try and make those things work together, but integrate all of those layers of technology to present that interface to the analyst instead of doing it manually.
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you, and I'm sure others will take those tips and run with them. I just want to say thank you for joining. Thank you again for joining us today. I look forward to continuing to work with your team as you continue down this orchestration automation ecosystem journey. You've been a great partner to work with, and appreciate you taking the time to share some of your insights with our audience.
Likewise, we appreciate you as well. Thank you, Mike.
Thanks, Calvin. Take care.
Well, thank you, Mike and Calvin. That was so great to hear how Calvin talked about the need for that interconnected layers of security, the need to bring telemetry in from across the enterprise to prioritize those alerts that cut through the billions of events that can be collected. Just a really compelling conversation about how to mitigate risk. So far in the event today, we've heard from organizations around the world about some of the challenges with understanding, communicating, and mitigating risk across the attack surface. And we know that this is challenging for all of you out there, especially given the number of alerts, the number of tools you have, the number of cyber attacks that you're facing. So it's with great pleasure that I welcome someone to the stage who can help us take a step back and consider what kind of technology and best practices we need to best mitigate risk. I'd like to welcome world-renowned expert on detection and response, Forrester analyst, Ali Mellon, to the stage. Ali, welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah.
Awesome. So let's get started. Today, we're going to be talking about key considerations for addressing cyber risk with a security platform. Now, I'm going to talk today about the trade-offs between the platform, portfolio, and standalone approaches, as well as how to actually evaluate a security platform. And I want to close by talking a little bit about some keys to success and how you can really position yourself well when you're thinking about what security platform you should be going with. So a little about me before we get started. I'm Ali Mellon. I'm a computer engineer by training, and I got my start in security being a hacker. My first experience with the security community was hacking the Square reader, turning it into a credit card skimmer, and then actually submitting that research to Black Hat. My talk got accepted. I flew out to Vegas and got to speak. I met a lot of amazing people in the community and basically fell in love with the industry immediately. I was working on my own consultancy for engineering for a few years and ended up back in the security industry before winding up at Forrester, covering all things security operations, people, process, technology, and the SOC. Honestly, all my favorite things. So I've seen cybersecurity and technology from a number of different angles. And with that in mind, let's dive in. We're going to start by talking about the trade-offs between different approaches to delivering security products today. And this is something that I see across multiple different markets, whether it's XDR, EDR, security analytics, SOAR, or others. And the distinction here is actually very important to understand, in part because the terms are quite often misused, and it can be very difficult to know what you're getting. Pretty much every security vendor claims to have a platform these days, but do they really? Let's compare the different approaches. The platform approach is a unifier between various tools the vendor offers, with additional integrations with third-party technologies. This has the potential to bring tight integration between the vendor's own offerings and a simplified user experience while still allowing for integrations with third parties. The portfolio approach is where a vendor has various offerings that may be loosely coupled or more strongly coupled depending on the vendor, but no dependencies exist between them. This has the potential for strong interoperability and gives much more flexibility to use other tools. And lastly, the standalone approach is where a vendor has a singular offering that they focus all of their efforts on. This requires strong interoperability with third-party offerings and has the potential to provide best of breed in addition to close partnerships with customers. Now, if you're particularly market savvy, you may have noticed one thing I did not include here is the suite approach. And that's because ultimately, suites are very rare at this point in this industry. If a vendor does not have an integration with other vendors, whether it's threat intelligence, SOAR integration, security analytics integrations, or others, it's much more difficult to get adoption in the enterprise market. Now, let's look at some of the drawbacks of each of these approaches. The drawbacks of the platform approach are the potential for the offering to bloat or for the vendor to become complacent in development. This is very dependent on the vendor, and not all platform vendors fall into this trap. When considering a platform approach, it's best to have an understanding of the vendor's vision and their roadmap for execution to make sure that you're making the right decision. The drawbacks of the portfolio approach are a potential for split focus with other offerings since the vendor has multiple. When considering a portfolio approach, it's best to identify what offerings the vendor prioritizes and how they're splitting up their R&D focus. Is it all stuck on one particular product, or do they spread it out evenly amongst them or semi-evenly? The drawbacks of the standalone offering are a potential need for deeper skills from the end users, the potential maintenance of using an independent offering, and the need for the end user to understand the product thoroughly and understand how to strategize its use with the rest of their tools. When considering standalone tools, it's best to identify if your team has the skills to actually support independent offerings. Now that we've gone through the potential benefits and the potential drawbacks, let's dig into how we figure out what a product is going to do for us. I want to talk a little bit about how to actually evaluate security platforms so you can get the most value out of the offering. There are a lot of components that security leaders need to consider, and I've seen this firsthand as I've gone through Forrester's Wave evaluation process. Now, I've identified 3 different things that are very critical for a security leader to understand and have insight into when they're actually considering implementing a new technology or buying a new technology. And the way that I've actually developed these requirements is through my work defining XDR. You know, as part of that process, one of the things that came up quite frequently was, hey, is this any different from security analytics? And the answer is a resounding yes, but it's very difficult to communicate how unless you have a thorough understanding of the different things that matter to practitioners and what they need to know as they go to buy a product. And so to better communicate with all of you, I have decided to group these into 3 separate categories. The first is capability, which refers to what's the technology actually doing? This is what we hear most about in marketing messages and in conversations with sales or in a high-level conversation about the technology. It covers what the technology does and how the technology addresses challenges that the practitioner has better than what they already have, and what the technology replaces, if anything. The second is dependencies. This is the much less fun side of tech, the maintenance and behind the scenes operations of it. What dependencies exist? What does maintenance look like? And what will employees need to actually use the technology? How's it going to be licensed? All of those really important things that we tend to shy away from when initially evaluating a product. And lastly is time to value. When am I going to be able to use this technology? What's the time to value? How do I deploy it? And what risks exist during the migration. All of these aspects are crucial when thinking not just about new markets, but also about how you're actually evaluating the products that you're considering adopting. You need answers to all of these questions, and honestly, even more that fall into these three categories. So one thing that I didn't mention here is something that's really crucial from a security point of view. And I kind of avoided getting into security specifics here because I wanted to give the overarching viewpoint of what you need to be considering when you're looking for a security analytics platform or a security platform generally. And so I want to get into something that is actually very security specific that I have put a lot of work into making sure I prioritize as I go through this process. And the way I want to introduce this concept is by talking about the incident response process. One of the most underrated aspects of incident response is the analysis and investigation portion. According to Forrester data, which is a survey of over 1,000 security decision makers, analysis or investigation, whatever you prefer to call it, takes the longest amount of time during the incident response process, more than anything else. And yet, it's often not represented in security products today. If you think about marketing messages, a lot of them revolve around the detection aspects. To me, this shows a lack of data-driven understanding of what security practitioners struggle with during the incident response lifecycle. A lack of prioritization of the analyst's experience with the tool itself. And this is pervasive in the industry. It's so pervasive that my colleague Jeff Pollard and I researched a new term to talk about this and to communicate what security leaders need to see from their security tools. So when thinking about security platforms, practitioners should be thinking about and prioritizing what we call analyst experience. You know, I used to work with a CISO who said that analysts have the worst job in the world. He would say that quite often. And he was only really half joking. Ultimately, security analysts have a very difficult job, but it's also a gateway into the security community and a security career for many individuals. And because of that, we need to make it better by improving the analyst experience. Analyst experience is defined as security analysts' perception of their interactions with a particular security product, service, and process across various work streams. It builds on a long history of user experience, customer experience, and employee experience, but now with a focus on the security analysts themselves. And this isn't just about better dashboards or sleeker interfaces. It's about improving the analyst workflow across tools and processes. There are 5 steps to analyst experience, as you can see on the slide in front of you. Discover, explore, classify, determine, and execute. These 5 steps can describe a plethora of different analyst workflows in the SOC, whether it's detection, investigation, and response, or even a task like threat hunting. The point is to focus on improving the analyst workflow for each of these 5 steps to improve analyst experience. And so when thinking about your strategy, consider analyst experience as a key piece of the equation. And further, consider it as a key criteria by which to evaluate vendors. How are they helping you achieve a better analyst experience? Or how are they making it worse? This has implications far beyond the technology you're adopting. Having a good analyst experience means that you're more likely to achieve better outcomes, whether it comes to stopping breaches or preventing incidents, and to retain security talent, because ultimately, if the workflows are better, they're going to enjoy what they're doing more. I want to close on a few keys to success when evaluating security platforms that I recommend. First, evaluate and validate individual offerings and potential joint value, especially when considering a platform. Think about what other tools you can integrate and have at your disposal. Oftentimes, I hear the value of multiple tools together, even those of the vendor's own offerings, have a much greater value than when they're separated out. Second, Consult with adjacent teams on what maintenance is going to be required and what use cases they might be able to use the same offering for as well. This is particularly applicable internally in the security team across different functions or with IT. Consider, just as we mentioned before, capabilities, dependencies, and time to value, and all the questions that come with that. And most importantly, prioritize the analyst experience. Let's try to make this industry a little easier to thrive in, shall we? Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to have gotten the time to chat with you guys about how to choose an effective security platform. And Leah, back to you.
Thank you so much, Ali. I figure I've got the best seat in the house to watch these presentations today, and that was just super compelling. I know that all of the audience will have taken away those keys to success and just very practical and good analytical advice for everyone. Really, really impressive. Thank you for that. So now I think it would be a great opportunity to hear what Trend Micro has in response to this kind of the challenges we've heard today, and taking into account Ali's advice as well. I'd like to welcome Trend Micro's very own CEO and co-founder, Eva Chen, to the stage to share her vision around a unified cybersecurity platform. Eva, welcome to Perspectives.
Hello, dear customer, partners, and co-workers. Welcome to Trend Micro Perspective. And this is about the power of one. All of us come together against the bad guys. Trend Micro has been in the cybersecurity business for 33 years. And throughout the years, we have been guiding our strategy using one formula. That is X equal to I plus U minus T. We always observe, monitor the infrastructure switch and the user behavior change. And we concentrate on limit the cyber threats impact to customers' business. Throughout those years, because of consistently following that strategy, we have been the innovation in the industry, come up with hybrid cloud security, AI and machine learning, XDR and platform approach. Is some of the example in the past few years. And in the past 2 years, we observed that digital transformation acceleration has introduced more complicated environment with new vulnerability, which broadened customers' attack surface. In 2022, attackers will exploit more broadened attack surface. This attack surface, including first, we see that attacker will shift left, means that they will attack targeting on DevOps tools and pipeline, assessing credibility, credential, and build systems to launch supply chain attack. Ransomware will become even more prominent and targeted, demanding big sums from big names with multi-stage explosion techniques. Vulnerabilities will be weaponized in record time. Before, when we found a vulnerability, we have more time to take measurement against the vulnerability. But now, the attackers are utilizing those zero-day vulnerability in a light speed method to launch an attack, and therefore it's harder to detect blended attacks. Now that we all know all of these different type of risk, how come it's so difficult to understand and manage this risk? I think the broadened attack surface means that we have users and applications are everywhere because of the acceleration in SaaS and cloud adoptions. Therefore, the security operations centers are facing too many alerts while limited visibility and silos of data. There's too many tools and vendors, and there's so many different compliance pressures against the security operations center, while we have too few resources and skill to take care of all these alerts and security measures. And that's why in the past 2 years, we have been thinking about how to help customer not just protect the assets, not just defense against the threats that we know, but also help customer to manage the total attack surface life cycle, which include discover attack surface, assess risk, and mitigate risk. This makes sure that Trend Micro need to transform our product portfolio into a complete integrated solution, which is we combine Trend Micro Cloud One, Network One, Workforce One, 3 product portfolio into one unified, we call it Trend Micro One, where we can provide through Vision One console to see the whole attack surface risk management. And you can discover attack surface, assess risk, and mitigate risk, all on one unified cybersecurity platform. This platform means that attack surface, we continuously monitor the expansion and change of customers' IT infrastructure, and therefore we can continuously update and give the full visibility of cyber assets that create your attack surface over time against and also compare it against industry benchmark. Also, we can assess the risk. Not only we find the status of the vulnerability, but also we measure against the current exploits of all this vulnerability or your business risk on this vulnerability, and therefore we can give you prioritized risk factors, and therefore customer, you can do the right preventative controls or take steps to mitigate and remediate risk according to your business impact and priority. That's why this time in this perspective, we are going to introduce another formula, which we call it the attack surface risk management and business impact formula to calculate your cybersecurity risk. This formula, we call it R equal to A minus S times V. This formula means that attack surface risk index, which include calculation of how this risk it will impact your business. And that risk index is composed of, first, A is attack exposure, means how likely the attacker will launch the attacks against your infrastructure, such as if you are in financial sector, and recently our threat knowledge tell us that the attacker are using this attack vulnerability to attack financial sector, and therefore your exposure, if you are in financial sector, your exposure, attack exposure is higher. And therefore, you need to put your security controls against this type of vulnerability in a higher priority. So S is security control. Put security control on the high impact area according to your business impact. And this combined with A minus S means how likely there will be a success attack on your infrastructure or on your business. And that you need to multiply with how well you have your visibility. If you only have partial visibility, then your risk is much higher. And therefore, we need to help customer visualize what is your overall attack surface, and therefore apply the high priority security control onto the right place. This formula will guide our development, our Trend Micro's Trend Micro 1 platform strategy, and help our customer minimize the attack surface risk. How we use this formula to help our customer, that we together, the power of one, the good guys against the bad guys. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Eva. You know, it's incredible to look back over the past 10 years. I can't believe how much innovation has happened. And as you said, it's all been about anticipating those shifts in the infrastructure, user behavior, and the changing threat landscape. And we have adapted quickly and moved our solutions along the way. This progression to a platform approach has really been a natural evolution and one that's so needed in the industry right now, I believe. So to take us deeper on Trend Micro 1, I'd like to invite my friend and longtime colleague, Wendy Moore, VP of Product Marketing, to the stage. Wendy, welcome to Perspectives.
Thank you so much, Leah. Really excited to be here. Great morning so far.
Well, exactly. Now, I know Eva showed us that platform image, right? That was the first thing that we saw in her presentation. And I really wanted to dive a little bit deeper and look at what's under the covers of that platform image.
Absolutely. You know, the platform image does a great job of giving you that snapshot of what Trend Micro 1 has for you, but there's so much under the covers. And I really appreciated Ali's take on distinguishing a platform from a portfolio from a point product, as it really illustrated how Trend Micro 1 is very much a platform. So this is, you know, a bit of an eye chart for you, but we're going to zoom through it and show you all of the details about what Trend Micro 1 is and how it comes together. So the entire platform is built on a set of common services. So common services like security engines, for example, machine learning or application control, but also things like a common data lake to which we can send the volumes of data that we get from all of our sensors, and which we can apply analytics to and do correlation on so that we can give you powerful risk insights. We've also got some common SaaS architecture. And of course, Trend Micro Research is the intelligence that fuels all parts of the Trend Micro 1 platform. You know, we have over 250 million sensors globally, and that is combined with human intelligence as well. So humans who are researching the cyber underground, but also our ZDI bug bounty program. All of this threat research fuels our products. Built upon these common services, though, are a layer of protection solutions. And the first of these is Workforce One. Workforce One is basically a solution that protects your users and all the tools they use to do their job on a daily basis. So things like endpoint security, email security to protect against phishing and business email compromise attacks, but also protection of your users as they use SaaS-based applications. The second protection solution is Trend Micro Cloud One. We're very well known in the market for this. In fact, we're a leader, a #1 market share. And Cloud One basically secures the things that your builders are creating in the cloud. So the applications that they're building, the infrastructure they're building. And it delivers all the protection solutions you need for everything from workloads to containers and serverless, even file storage or scanning your code repositories for vulnerabilities. So we protect against the threats that these different types of infrastructure are exposed to, but we also make sure that there's no misconfigurations of your cloud infrastructure, which can expose you to vulnerabilities. And then the final protection solution is Network One. So Network One protects your network regardless of where it is. And so we can do network security in your office, in your data center, and coming in probably, I'd say about 2 months' time, we're going to be launching a Secure Access Service Edge project, which will allow you to go on a first step, really important step towards achieving zero trust framework in your organization by doing risk-based profiling of your users and controlling what they can access and what resources are available to them. So the next part of the platform is really what I see as such an exciting piece. And this is where there's been so much innovation at Trend Micro in the last little while. And that is Trend Micro Vision One. This is the piece where your security operations team spends their time. This is where they go to do their extended detection and response, to do hunting and launch investigations. This is where they have centralized visibility of your entire environment. And because we've implemented this attack surface risk management lifecycle that Eva talked about, we now have amazing risk insights for your analysts, for your security operations teams that help them to simplify investigations and prioritize where they're going to spend their time. And also reporting. Reporting is really important. Different stakeholders have different requirements, and that's why we've created executive level dashboards that you can drill down into the most detailed parts of your environment. So these dashboards give you at a glance view of what your risk posture looks like, how it's changing over time, and what your priorities should be in terms of risk mitigation. So really excited. You're going to see a lot more on all of these new security operations capabilities coming up in some demos moving forward. But we know it's not just about technology. It's about people too. You know, one of the number one things we hear from customers is a challenge they have is having enough resources and having the right skilled resources. And that's why we wrap an entire set of managed services around Trend Micro One, so that we can help augment your team so that you can get the most out of Trend Micro One. So we offer services like managed XDR, incident response, onboarding services so that you're set up and configured the best way possible. And then finally, we aren't an island. As Ali said, there is so much important information that is in all the tools that are available in your environment, from operations tools to security tools. And that's why we've integrated with several key players in the industry to improve our visibility of your attack surface, to improve our understanding of your risk, and to streamline risk mitigation.
Oh, that's amazing, Wendy, to see that entire stack diagram being built and really shows us what's under the covers of that, that more simplified platform image. You know, security across layers. I love the Vision One with the ability for that analyst experience to be able to see everything come together there. But what are the three big takeaways, three big values of the platform?
Yeah. You've heard a lot so far this morning, and there's still much more exciting stuff to come. But what I really think it comes down to is helping our customers to understand, communicate, and mitigate risk. You know, we've got this attack surface risk management lifecycle that just is continually operating to give you the best possible view of your attack surface, to tell you and your analysts what you should be doing next, and really to streamline all of those processes. But really, it also helps you to communicate, right? We know we've got the C-suite, we've got the board that you need to communicate your risk situation to, and these dashboards will help you to do that. The other key thing that we do is we help you to improve and become more agile and simplify compliance. So, you know, you can quickly pivot as new business requirements, new technology requirements, or new compliance requirements come along, because we're able to cover, your cloud. We're able to cover your endpoint, your email, and also your network, all from a single solution, so that you can easily adopt new technologies and secure them as they come into your environment. And then finally, my favorite part of Ali's talk was about the analyst experience, because that was my favorite part, because we have put so much focus on the analyst experience. So we've really worked on workflows, implementing things like security playbooks that will give an analyst, insights as to what they should be doing next, give them expert recommendations, and help them to learn on the job. So we can up-level an analyst from being a level 1 analyst to a level 2 or a 3.
Excellent. Can we take a deeper look?
We absolutely can. And with that, I would like to welcome my colleagues Frank Kuo, our Chief Platform Officer, and Rachel Jin from our product management team to take us a little deeper and show us Trend Micro One in action. Over to you, Frank.
Thank you, Wendy. So when we introduced Vision One, launched Vision One a year and a half ago, basically our goal was to focus on the XDR, right, with the goal of giving you the best detections and faster response to threat. And this year, I'm very happy that we're so focusing on this attack service risk management lifecycle across Trend Micro One platform. And the Vision One is at the core of Trend Micro One platform, which will give you and provide and help you with the discovering attack service and understand your risk posture with our attacks service risk index, risk insights here, and provide you the executive level and operational level dashboard and reporting for you and your organizations to better understand, communicate, and mitigate the risk. So let's drill down to what we have learned from Eva earlier about this Trend Micro One platform, which is centering around this attack service risk management lifecycle. And the whole life cycle is a continual process of 3 steps. 1 is discovering attack service. Next is assess your risk, and then mitigate the risk. So what is exactly the attack service? It is a totality of all possible potential touch points that are exposed to the cyber risk. Okay. So for example, you have a unpatched web server, public-facing web server, and you have an AWS 3 bucket with a weak password, or you have employees working from home using a unmanaged device and trying to access your corporate resources. So as you grow your business and your company is embracing the digital transformation, you're actually facing a very complex and a very massive attack service. And it is very dynamic and it's constantly evolving. So you better to have a very solid mechanisms to continuously assess your environment so that you have a better visibility on attack service. So how Trend Micro help you discover attack service? First of all, Trend Micro collects a vast amount of detections and collects telemetry data from our sensors across cloud, network, endpoint, and sensor, and emails. And there's some third-party tools you're using that are also very, very fantastic source of data, like Active Directory, Splunk, and Qualys. And recently, we also partnered with BitDiscovery to improve the visibility you have. You're missing the visibility of your external-facing cyber assets here. So as you can learn from our news release yesterday, we're actually embracing the whole ecosystem partner, trying to mitigate a gap of the security operation for you, right? And we'll continue to invest in the integration with the ecosystem partners to make sure to maximize the visibility for you. All right, so obviously the more sensors you deploy, the better the visibility you can have. Right? But unlike traditional asset discovery tools that only give you a list of asset inventory, our approach is unique. So while we are discovering an attack service for you, we're actually mapping the connections and activities between the assets and the user account and building what we call the knowledge graph. This is a very critical component and factor when you assess and calculating the risk. And this is also a very powerful visibility tools for your IR teams to conduct the incident response as well as the operations that are necessary to facilitate the jobs. Now let me turn to Rachel to give you a quick demo of how we help you discover attack surface.
Thank you, Frank. This is exciting, and let me run the first demo. So the first step in understanding our risk posture is discovering our cyber asset attack surface, including both internal and external assets. Today, the new attack surface discovery finds known and unknown devices inside and outside the corporate perimeter. It also supports the discovery of internet-facing assets, including public domains and IP addresses. In Q2, we will add user account discovery. We also plan to expand use cases to discover much more of the attack surface, including cloud apps, cloud workload, and cloud storage, which is coming soon. Let's start from device. Let me show you how we discover managed and unmanaged devices. Vision One's attack surface discovery creates an initial estimated number of devices based on seat count, telemetry data, and devices discovered through third-party integrations such as Active Directory. We can also identify risky devices and see the level of security applied to devices which are managed by a Trend Micro agent. Vision One allows you to drill down to examine the attack surface more closely. To do so, simply click on one of the numbers in blue. By drilling down into the attack surface discovery app, we can examine the risk insights in detail. Here, you can see how we help the SOC team to prioritize and manage risks by showing the devices most at risk. At every stage of the attack surface user interface, we actively encourage customers to enable as many data sources as possible. Let me click to extend the visibility. Here you can see the list of all data sources. The more data sources that are connected to the Trend Micro One platform, the more complete your overall security posture will be. Vision One includes connectors for Trend Micro products across the endpoints, email, web, server, and network platforms. In addition, we also have an ever-evolving ecosystem of third-party integrations, helping to build a more complete attack surface visibility by including risk insights for user accounts, Office 365 usage, vulnerability management, and third-party web and firewall telemetry. And more will be added in the future release. Now, let's move to the next attack surface, internet-facing assets. Trend Micro has developed a partnership with BitDiscovery to discover internet-facing assets. Vision One will correlate data from BitDiscovery and other existing data sources to discover domain names and public-facing IP addresses. Vision One knows every bit of the internet, making inventory management quick and easy. As you can see, Vision One has identified the domains and public IP address. Assets are geographically identifiable, easily helping to identify any rogue public-facing assets. You can drill down into these internet-facing assets and identify unexpected services and ports that are in use. Additionally, we can also see security issues related to our domains, for example, weak encryption and certificate issue. We plan to introduce the discovery of user accounts in Q2. In this case, it doesn't need to have a Trend Micro agent deployed to retrieve this information. Vision One could see the attack surface of user account from Active Directory and prioritize the user account risk by showing the users most at risk. As we discover user accounts, we map connections between each account using the asset graph so that over time we are able to discover more assets and their relationships, and also learn more about the attack path and the risk profile. For example, we will look at multiple accounts used by one device. We look at account privilege, we predict potential attack paths, and more. Like I mentioned earlier, we plan to discover much more of the attack surface beyond user accounts, devices, and internet-facing assets to include cloud infrastructure assets. So this is the demo to showcase the first stage of the risk lifecycle, attack surface discovery. Back to you, Frank.
Right, thank you, Rachel. That's great. Good. Now that you have a visibility of attack surface, but you still have no clear indication as to what level of risk, for your your cybersecurity assets exposed to, right? So the next step is very, very important, which is to assess the risk associated with your attack surface. So now, just because you see same vulnerabilities on two systems, one is your employee's laptop, one is your public-facing web servers, right? Both with the same vulnerability, say Log4j, right? The level of the risk can be very, very different when we link to the business potential impact, right? So calculating risk is very complex. So we use artificial intelligence and expert analysis to look at over 700 risk attributes. The algorithm itself is very complicated. Fortunately, we learned from Eva this morning, right? She just came up with another brilliant formula for us to easily understand and communicate the concept of attack surface risk index. So we want to give you the at-a-glance understanding of risk posture, of how it's trending over time. So attack exposure. This is telling us how likely you will be under attack. So we can learn a lot of insight from the first step of attack surface discovery. And we also correlate, for example, those unpatched vulnerability on the operating systems or misconfiguration of your AWS services. And we also analyze the threat data that we collect from our sensors with our correlate with our global threat intelligence services. For example, it is important to factor in threat intelligence into the attack exposure you need to have when we know a specific or particular ransomware group is targeting your industry. Okay. And for security control, it is telling you how solid the security control you deployed that can fend off the attacks. So we're assessing, we're looking at things like whether or not you have the right or proper preventive security measures in place. How is your security policy? How is your configuration around your security controls? Do you have the required compliance in place? Okay. And the net effect, attack exposure and the security control, is how much you can lower the impact and the likelihood of a successful attack. But keep in mind, we're not just looking at one or a few systems here, right? We have to factor in the level of visibility and the coverage you have of your entire IT infrastructure into this risk calculation so that you can have a more meaningful and a more holistic risk index, if you will. So let me turn back to Rachel again to give you a demo of what we are doing here today in terms of helping you to assess risk. Rachel?
Next, I will show you how we assess risk, leveraging that risk formula. Here, you can see the executive dashboard landing page in Vision 1, which gives the CISO an overall risk index score based upon several factors, including your infrastructure's vulnerability exposures, attack and threat detections, and security configurations. The risk index is a comprehensive score based on the dynamic and continuous assessment. With this insight, organizations can take company-wide remediation steps and preventive measures to lower the company-wide risk index over time. The risk index also enables the CISO to compare their risks over time and see how their organization compares to other organizations of a similar size, in a similar region, or in the same industry. This is often the type of information that the C-level and board wants to see. It provides a way for senior security leaders to communicate their efforts and the results. In addition to the overall company security posture, Vision 1 also provides risk assessments for individual users and devices. Here, for example, if I click one device, we can see the risk factors which contribute to the risk score of this device. And we can drill down into the individual risk indicators, such as XDR detection, cloud app activity, and threat detection. We can even pivot through to the XDR workbench to do further investigation. Now that we have seen the company overall risk index and risk profiling per user or device, we move on to the exposure overview to understand the severity of threats in our environment and the likelihood of them being exploited. Today, the exposure index is calculated by examining unpatched vulnerability, system configuration. However, we will also be adding additional factors, including activity and behaviors. The Unpatched Vulnerabilities tab includes widgets to help understand the state of patching within the organization. Here are some examples. Mean time to patch shows the average time taken to deploy patches, and more widgets to help customers to prioritize vulnerabilities to patch. CVE density, the number of CVEs per endpoint, clearly shows the assets which need immediate attention. By clicking View Details, you can drill down to examine the vulnerable endpoints. Here you can see a list of endpoints and the associated vulnerability count per endpoint. This helps us to prioritize which endpoints need the most urgent attention. In System Configuration tab, we can identify unexpected public services and ports that should not be exposed to the internet. We can also identify hosts with insecure connection issues, which may result in data leaking during data transmission. Let me click View Details to look at the host list with insecure connection issues. Examples include deprecated encryption protocols, invalid or expired certificates, and more. We'll be adding more infrastructure risk factors into the exposure overview in Q2 and later this year, such as cloud security posture management, misconfiguration check in Active Directory, and more to come. Next, we come to Attack Index, which helps the CISO understand the attack intensity on their organization. The index is calculated based on the number of known detections, the number of impacted assets, and the severity of each unique threat type defined by Trend Micro threat experts. This helps prioritize what's critical. The attack index includes widgets, which breaks attacks down into the attack phase and the attack vector. We also show you the latest top 3 threats in your industry and the impact. Additionally, you can view attacks by the attack type and by the attack layer, email, endpoint, or network. This type of insight can help identify where the greatest attack intensity is being felt and shed light on where added controls could be helpful. Next, we have the security configuration overview, which gives the CISO visibility of the deployment of the critical controls. For example, how many devices we discovered, how many have deployed security protection, and how many have not deployed yet. We also provide deeper insight into which security features have been enabled. So this is how we assess risk, by providing C-level management view and a more tactical and detailed SOC view to help our customers to understand and communicate the risk. Back to you, Frank.
Right, excellent, Rachel. Thank you so much. Now, as we're helping you quantify and visualize your cyber risk, right, we're also helping you prioritize those risky events that are most impactful to your business. And we hope you can take immediate actions to mitigate a risk. But there are various types of risk events in your organization, right? For some organizations, because of lack of security skills or resources or expertise, they probably don't know how to research on how to take actions, what actions need to take, right? Then for these customers that rely on vendors like Trend Micro to give them the guidance for them to mitigate a risk. But for some organization, of course, with much more mature security operations setup, right? Well, sometimes it's not a question of what course of action they need to take. It's more like a question of how to take the actions more effectively and more efficiently so that they can save time and resources for their security operation team. So with Trend Micro One platform, right, not only we provide the security guidance in terms of the security playbooks here, we also provide an automation framework that allows you to execute the playbooks automatically across Trend Micro product and some third-party tools. Okay, so here's an example of steps you need to remediate when the recent Samba vulnerability across your Linux servers. So as you can see here, with our security playbooks, by automating those manual processes, manual works, or repetitive steps, you can actually save time. You can actually save probably not just hours, probably if not days, right, for your security operation team. And all these security playbooks are centrally provided in Trend Micro One platform and Vision One, right? And you can execute from Vision One console across Trend Micro product and third-party tools. Now, we at Trend Micro, we understand that in order to make attack service risk management lifecycle more meaningful or reliable or trustworthy to you, we need to partner with the ecosystem, right? And like I said, we just made an announcement, 2 days ago, right? The most important is work with the partners to understand how do we fit into their security strategy and mitigate a security gap because of all these tools you're using. And we'll continue to invest in 2022 and going forward, right? And now let me turn back to Rachel to give you the last demo we have here. How do we help you streamline the security operation? Rachel?
Okay, so let's go to the last demo. Now that we have discovered our attack surface and assessed our risk posture, it's time to move on to the third stage of the attack surface risk management lifecycle, risk mitigation. Trend Micro Expert Response Guidance, coming soon, assists our customers with their mitigation efforts. And security playbooks help accelerate internal processes and automate threat response workflows. Security teams can use these automated playbooks to address various use cases, such as threat intelligence enrichment, incident response, vulnerability management, threat hunting, and so on. Playbooks can be quickly and easily created from the predefined templates. Here, you can see the playbook editor, which provides easy automation through a simple interface, suitable for users at all levels of coding ability. The playbook editor enables you to input condition settings, such as operating system, endpoint type, and IP address. And also action settings, such as notification method, and soon the ability to edit the notification template. As you can see, Vision One makes it easy for security analysts to create playbook from templates. And in Q2, we will support more advanced users with the ability to create their own playbooks from scratch. So this is how we mitigate the risk via an accelerated workflow using Vision One security playbooks. The workflow could be automatically running or could request user interaction to move on to the next stage based on what customers need. Thank you so much for watching all the demos. Hope you enjoyed our session. I am going to hand it back to Leah and Wendy in Ottawa. Leah, Wendy, back to you.
Thank you so much, Frank and Rachel. It is amazing, Wendy, to see that much innovation. I know we added hundreds of features last year, and it really is good to see it in action.
That is for sure. It's just been so much activity and delivery over the last, year, like you said. And the thing I loved about the demos is they really clearly demonstrated the three big steps in that attack surface risk lifecycle. So, discovering, assessing, and then mitigating the risk. And really, I hope that made it clear to you how we're helping you to understand, communicate, and mitigate risk improve agility, and really simplifying things for that security operations teams and giving them a great experience.
Well, I know we certainly think this is a cool innovation, but what do the industry experts out there in the market think?
Well, I think of the biggest industry experts as being our customers. And we've had hundreds of customers who have been trying out a lot of the new features that you heard about today, and the feedback has been fantastic. We really inform our product roadmap with that customer feedback. But industry analysts have been giving us great reviews as well. So, really happy to show across the board in Forrester Waves, we're a leader. We're a leader when it comes to endpoint, email, and enterprise detection and response, both EDR and extended detection and response. So really strong there. But it doesn't end there. We are #1 in terms of market share, according to IDC, when it comes to corporate endpoint security and to hybrid cloud workloads. So very strong in terms of how customers are choosing us over the competition. One of the more recent results that we've had has been March's MITRE Ingenuity results. So for the last 3 years, since MITRE started doing their attack testing, we've been a leader here. And in March's results, where they did real-world testing against Wizard Spider and Sandworm, we had 100% detection of attack steps. We were ranked #1 in terms of Linux protection and detection, and we ranked #1 as well for protection. So lots of really strong market proof points in terms of testing and also deep analysis on our products that are proving us to be a leader here.
Yeah, great to see that validation, Wendy. So if I'm in the audience, if I'm a customer or a not quite yet customer, how do I get my hands on this technology?
Well, this is, to me, the place that you should be heading to right away. We have a lot of the capabilities you've talked about today are available to existing Vision One customers in preview. The entire platform is available, but because we are a DevOps organization, we're regularly releasing new features, and you can try them out as they release within Vision One. If you're not a Vision One customer yet, why not do a trial? We give you a free 60-day trial where you can try it out in your environment and take advantage of learning that can come from visualizing what's happening in your environment with Vision One. So I encourage you all, within the resources section of your interface, there's a link there to the trial. And if you have Vision One, try out the new features.
Wow, so it's great to see all that innovation, great to see the market validation, love the trials. That's fantastic. All of that is important, but we know that the most important thing about this platform approach is protecting customers. And so I think this would be a good time to, as our final session, to welcome a Trend Micro customer who knows the realities of cyber risk, who knows the value of a platform approach. I would like to welcome Marnie Wilking, CISO, Global Head of Security and IT Risk Management at Wayfair. Marnie, welcome to the stage.
Thank you, Leah, for such a nice introduction. I'm so excited to be here today with the Trend team and so honored to be included. The content today has been amazing. I always appreciate Eva's insights, and I have certainly learned a lot from everyone. So we talked a lot today about risk mitigation in the face of new threats and new environments, and as Eva pointed out, our broadened and evolving attack surfaces. And of course, there's a shortage of skilled people to help identify those threats and defend the new cloud environments. And we as cybersecurity leaders are expected to communicate threats and vulnerabilities and risks across a wide spectrum of people in the organization, from the engineers who need to do the remediation to the executive leadership and board who want to understand the impact and the governance. It's no wonder we CISOs are exhausted. Like many of you, I have experienced those things in the midst of a digital transformation to the cloud and hyper-COVID growth. I'll share more about our story, but first, here's a little bit of information about Wayfair. Our digital platform supports more than 27 million active customers, over 23,000 suppliers who provide more than 22 million catalog items through our supplier-facing applications. We support more than 16,000 employees, which includes 3,000 engineers in 6 cities across 3 countries, and our own in-house customer service agents across the US, the UK, and Germany. From a warehouse perspective, we have 18 fulfillment centers and 38 delivery centers across the UK, Canada, US, and Germany. We also operate e-commerce sales and delivery to customers in those 4 countries. And just in case you didn't know, Wayfair is actually made up of 5 distinct brands. There's Wayfair, but also Perigold, our luxury brand, and Joss & Main, All Modern, and Birch Lane. So there are more sites than you thought to go furniture shopping. And this year we'll be launching physical stores for All Modern and Joss & Main. So soon you'll be able to shop in person. Wayfair's digital transformation to improve customer experience in e-commerce started many years ago with enhanced imagery and in-room view options and increased inventory options. We've really started to become cloud forward in 2018 when we partnered with GCP to enable smoother ramp up during big events like Way Day and holiday shopping. And we took advantage of Google's big data capabilities to support faster data-driven decisions. And it worked. In 2019, after migrating consumer sites to GCP, that holiday shopping period, affectionately known as Cyber 5, required a lot less effort to increase capacity and supported the increased traffic and order volume with very little hands-on effort. So there are a lot of companies who have been native to or have been moving to public cloud infrastructure for several years. But certainly during COVID, for a lot of companies, that migration became necessary or accelerated to meet demand. COVID accelerated a lot of transformation timelines, including Wayfair's. We'd already begun our cloud journey, but in 2020, when we were really gearing up our digital transformation, COVID hit, sent everyone home, and suddenly everyone decided they really didn't like the couch they were sitting on, or that they needed outdoor play sets to keep their kids busy, or office furniture to work better. The number of visits to our sites and apps nearly doubled, and order volume increased by 62% year over year from 2019 to 2020. The shift to Google Cloud for those consumer workloads worked great. We were able to accommodate that sharp increase in volume, and we celebrated the cloud transformation for consumer had been really successful. Did I mention that we provide supplier interfaces? That provides not only the ability to update and upload inventory, but also the images that are associated with that inventory, the end-to-end logistics for those suppliers to ensure that their products get to our customers. There was a big increase in orders, which included a big increase in suppliers and a big increase in inventory. And we realized that the fulfillment processing and supplier interfaces needed to be able to scale and flex just as well as the consumer interfaces, because we needed to support those additional orders, and suppliers wanted to provide more inventory so that customers can make their homes more beautiful. And we'd already begun the projects around building out the physical retail stores. So we knew we needed a resilient way to support the growing order and delivery volume, support the physical store build, and to address our growing attack surface. So we needed a way to quickly move from our on-prem data centers to Google Cloud without derailing our engineers, our employees, our customers, our supplier partners, or our business initiatives. We partnered very closely with Google Cloud to create a strategy that included both transformation to decouple and containerize applications that were ready, and to do a lift and shift for applications that needed more time but could still benefit from the cloud capabilities. We have fully leaned into a hybrid cloud model, which helps us support additional suppliers, additional demand, more inventory, more orders around the world, while maintaining compliance where necessary and flexibility for specific functions like call center where possible. From an endpoint security standpoint, we were already investing heavily in Zero Trust as an initiative. At the start of the push to work from home, we were able to speed up a few of those projects to get employees up and running from home with very few hiccups. That accelerated the work overall as we doubled down on identity as the perimeter, working really closely with our engineering teams to prioritize applications that could be decoupled to use MFA as opposed to requiring the VPN connectivity, which eventually reduced the load on the VPN overall. And the engineering teams were able to focus on performance for those applications that still required VPN, overall accelerating our digital transformation. Of course, with digital acceleration comes risks. I have heard everything about the cloud. It's scary because there's no security, or the cloud does all of the security for you. The truth is obviously in between, but it is a very different way of doing things. The old adage, what got you here won't get you there, is very true as you move along the digital transformation journey. Calvin alluded to this as well. We are always changing. Your move to the cloud requires a different way of thinking about your environment and your attack surface and how you find and manage your assets and vulnerabilities. We realized that our hybrid model that had been working pretty well was going to have to very quickly scale up in the cloud, still maintain the visibility in our data center, even while we were migrating things out of the data center. So how would we know what functions and servers were moving where and when, and how would we make sure that we could enable security tools and licenses in the cloud as applications were being moved or redesigned for containers? And in addition, we understood that there were new risks to being in the cloud and being hybrid. The users really are your perimeter, so identity verification and access management become key security controls. And as Chris LaFleur said earlier, we all know that users can be susceptible to phishing, which makes controlling and monitoring credentials and access even more important. Shadow IT can become more prevalent when engineers have more access to cloud and all employees have access to SaaS applications. Accelerating developer velocity is a key win for cloud migration and is great for the developers and business, but it can result in missed security controls if the proper guardrails and checks are not in place. I think you're all probably familiar with the NIST risk management framework. I put it here because regardless of your industry or maturity, it's a great place to start. A couple of our guests have talked about making risk management a continuous process. So I think it's important to point out that the NIST framework is a cycle. It was built that way intentionally because risk management is not a one-time exercise, even and especially in the cloud. Also, it's important to leverage any risk management in the context of your people, your processes, and your technology. David Chow talked about this earlier. You have to assess what you have in each of those areas and ensure you're maximizing the value and input in each area, but compensate where you need to. Many of us are struggling to get the people we need, and depending on the maturity of your program, you may or may not have all of the processes in place that you need. So we may be relying more on partners and tools, that technology piece, to help us get visibility into our assets, threats, and vulnerabilities. And we need those tools and partners to be efficient. I will go back to my previous comment about what got us here won't get us there. We can't do things the same way we've been doing them for the last 10 to 15 years in security. Those tools and partners that you have in your arsenal that have worked for you for the last 10 to 15 years may not be the right tools and partners in your new cloud environment for identifying assets, protecting your data, detecting attacks, and being resilient enough to recover. Thankfully, there's a lot of innovation in this space. For one, the DevOps and rugged DevOps movement that Leah and David mentioned earlier has led to a lot of automation. If we can have configuration as code and infrastructure as code, then we can have security as code built into the configuration and infrastructure. Remember, we heard from Mila earlier that a significant number of exploits are a result of misconfigurations. We leveraged automation tooling like Terraform to ensure security tools and policies were built into our cloud deployment, so that as applications were migrating to the cloud, regardless if it was a brand new deploy or a lift and shift of an application, the underlying security tools and compliance configurations are built into the deployment through that automated tooling. We also leverage both native cloud capabilities and tool capabilities to continuously look for misconfigurations so that we can find ways to quickly remediate and mitigate those issues. We all struggle with visibility and understanding how many and where our assets are, and that problem seems to grow exponentially with the cloud. Thankfully, there are new companies and new products from existing companies that will provide not just the visibility you need into your assets and vulnerabilities and misconfigurations, but also provide the prioritization for addressing those issues. Jeremiah spoke earlier about continuous discovery. As we all know from recent events like Log4j, zero-day vulnerabilities are not going away, and they can be a big surprise and have a huge impact. We need to have the right tools and processes to find and remediate or mitigate those issues. Developers have the ability to deploy so many more assets and code, and they might inadvertently reintroduce vulnerabilities that you thought you'd eradicated. The ability to do continuous discovery of both assets and vulnerabilities with the prioritization of issues will support your ability to remediate and mitigate those that present the most exposure, not necessarily the ones that are the highest rated. Focusing on the ones that create the most exposure and the most risk frees up time for your team and the developers to focus on the creation, not the cleanup. Our Zero Trust framework has provided the framework and controls we needed for identity and device validation as a perimeter. Our strategy is to ensure that all employees have access to all of the things that they need to do their jobs from wherever and whenever they need it, as long as we can make access decisions based on our confidence in the identity and the devices. That has really accelerated our ability to provide more access while managing the attack surface associated with end users. And at Wayfair, we've leveraged a combination of cloud-native security capabilities along with partners and tools who are cloud first or cloud forward. Having a partner who knows and understands the differences in asset structure and attack surface in the cloud can have a big impact on your ability to not only quickly detect and respond to an incident, but prevent the incident in the first place. Ultimately, my job really is to manage risks in a way that allows the business to move as fast as it needs to move, whether that's by design or because everyone is suddenly working from home and decides to order office equipment all at the same time. Leah mentioned earlier that many leaders feel that they don't really understand cyber risk. In order for us to support business velocity and manage risks at the same time, there are two things I recommend. One, really understand the business and ask and understand not only where they think the risks are, but also where there might be inappropriate friction. And don't just communicate the risks to the business, discuss the risks with the business. Identify where you think there might be issues and then ask them what they think about it. Do they agree? If they do, then the conversation gets to turn to how do we address this? If they don't agree that that's a risk, they get to explain why, and you might learn a lot about the business when you ask that question. They also might not understand the new risks of the new cloud environment. You can have great conversations with your tech and business leaders by working with them to model the threats and understand how the business flows work. And understand the risk tolerance of the business. Give them options that might include both prevention and detection techniques for managing and mitigating risks. We as security professionals often go straight to prevent, but sometimes a prevention technique can introduce too much friction for the business. Sometimes it may be necessary to leverage detection to reduce the friction and enable you and the business to learn more about the risks in the process. And secondly, know where you have visibility to your assets, vulnerabilities, and threats, and where you don't. Understand what capabilities are available in whatever environment you're in, where you were using one tool on-prem, maybe during your digital transformation, that tool may not work. So maybe you can augment that tool in the cloud with some cloud-native capabilities while you're looking for the best tools and partners. Do a tools inventory to determine if the tools you've been using are going to be able to give you the visibility to your assets and attacks, or if it might be time to move to something more appropriate for your new environment. Digital transformation, especially done at a high rate of speed, while also trying to keep the lights on and add new features at the same time, can be intimidating and exhausting. The cloud is not scary, but it will come with new risks for your business. If you understand your business's priorities and what you currently have and don't have, you can obtain the tools and partners you need to plan for your own security transformation and communicate those risks in a way that will support the business while also providing you with the technology and processes and people to manage those risks. Thank you again for having me. This was very fun. And now I'll send it back to the studio.
Thank you so much, Marnie. I have to admit, I might be one of those customers who added load to your business over the pandemic. Some fantastic things from Wayfair. I loved hearing about your digital transformation, your total move to cloud and being cloud forward, and the kind of risks that introduced. And thank you for the practical advice and your perspectives that you shared with the audience today. That really is a great conclusion to this 2.5-hour action-packed virtual event that we like to call Perspectives. A reminder, please check out the Perspectives website to access the additional resources that we've loaded there for you. And remember, we have been recording these sessions. You have an opportunity to rewatch today's session, share that with your colleagues. And again, you also have the opportunity to experience Trend Micro 1 and other things that we offer through the Trial and Assessment Center. Visit that Perspectives website for more information. Thank you so much to everyone for joining today. I hope to see you all again soon. Bye-bye.